will be settled, but nothing, you know, it's like I say, don't ever wake up mad. And we never did seem to hold any grudges, and, you know, but little things pop up here and there. They're not all perfect, and sometimes when you work very long hours and something goes wrong, you become a little upset with someone, or they become upset with you. But nothing ever is really too serious. Yes. Does Leonard Nimoy have what? Does Leonard Nimoy have anything to do with my character's first name? I've often wondered about that, and I've never asked Gene Roddenberry on his. I look at it and I wonder if Gene doesn't smile out of the side of his mouth. He's very sly that way.
We have a little special thing we'd like to do.
It's not time for this guy to go yet.
Oh.
But he doesn't know anything about this.
What are you going to do for me?
Well, this is a very special time and a very special guy. We have a very important announcement to make. Don't read it. You all know that the Academy Awards for Best Actor are presented in April, right? Academy Awards for April, for Best Actor. Even though this is June, the Space Truck 3 Committee has decided that we don't really need to wait that long because we know the winner is already, don't we? The envelope, please. And the winner is DeForest Kelley.
I'm going to see if I can read what's on there. It says DeForest Kelley, Best Actor by unanimous decision, 1984 Space Trek 3. Thank you. I am deeply touched. And I mean this very sincerely. This could not mean more or as much to me if I had won from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I'd rather have it from you. Looks a little less strong. Gee, that throws me. I really am. I can't tell you how much that means. I wish that it were possible for me to have one made up for each one of you, because you all deserve an Academy Award too. And I thank you for the bottom of my heart. That will have a very, very prestigious place in my house. It's going to be on a dresser right across from my bed that I wake up on. All right, how much more time do I have?
You got about 8 minutes.
8 minutes. 8 minutes.
That scene with the alien, the one that spoke to
I feel that the scene was the alien, the one who spoke backwards. Yes. Well, I love that scene, and it was a very enjoyable scene to do. He was marvelous, the alien, and naturally doesn't look anything like that at all, you know. But it was a fun scene to do, and it was the kind of a scene that I wish could have really gone on a little longer. What we had discussed doing with the Lucas people, they were going to pick up McCoy coming down the street outside of the bar. And as he turns in, they were going to have a shot of a bar across the street called Star Wars Bar. Well, I think it would have been great fun if they had done that. Yes, in the pink.
Where did they come up with 20 years for the Enterprise?
I don't know. Where did they come up with 20 years from the Enterprise? Well, it's been almost 20 years. But, oh, I shouldn't get into these technical discussions. Nothing at all. Yes, good. Which sick bay did I like the best? Well, I missed the old one, to tell you the truth. It's an interesting question that you pose, because I don't think I've ever discussed it with anyone. But I had a very uncomfortable feeling in that sick bay. I don't know why. I really shouldn't have, I guess, but it didn't feel right to me somehow or another.
Just wanted to know, since you got your Oscar, as an actor, is there any role that you would like to play or wish that you could have played?
Has there been any role I would like to play, wish that I could have played? I'm sure tonight I'll think of something, you know, that's, oh God, I would have loved that, you know. Not too long ago, I came very close to getting a film at Metro with Marlon Brando and Jack Nichols. Trying to think of the title of it, a Western type of thing.
The Missouri Break.
The what?
The Missouri Break.
The Missouri Break. I'm right here. I still think Spock's got me scrambled. But, and it was a marvelous role, and it was a heavy. And I was a bit disappointed. I would like to play that. I've always really wanted to do some of the things. I don't know whether you remember an actor named Harvey. God, I can't remember anything today. Lawrence Harvey.
Yes.
Lawrence Harvey played a lot of things that I came close to when I was doing some stage work, and it kind of he played a lot of charming heels, and those roles always more or less intrigued me, and not the out and out heavy, but you know, the guy who leads someone on you think is an awful nice guy, and it turns out just to be a terrible heel. That's kind of the thing I think I'd like to do. Yes. He's asked me about the fire at Paramount. It's true, Bill Shatner put it out. He ran right over there and grabbed that hose and put it out. Yes, you're quite sure. No, behind you, there, yes.
Have you ever enjoyed your arguments with Spock, and do you believe that they are a necessary part of your character?
Do I really enjoy the arguments that I've had with Spock, and do I feel it's a necessary part of my character? Yes, I've always enjoyed and looked forward to those moments, and whenever, during the series, we always wondered what was going to be in the script concerning the two of us. And I think it became a necessary part of the character. That did not take place until maybe 3 or 4 episodes that really started to begin to come into play. And I really don't know whether it was, it's been so long ago, whether it was injected by Gene Roddenberry or it just happened that Leonard and I thought it would be kind of funny to play a certain scene a little bit oblique, off-key, and then they began to expand upon it. Well, that's time for one more question, and then we're running to the autograph room, I suppose. Thank you.
Okay, if there is a Star Trek 4, how would you like the character of Dr. McCoy?
If there is a Star Trek 4, how would I like the character of Dr. McCoy to be continued? I had an idea that, they're not going to do this, but I had an idea a long time ago. I would have liked to have seen something take place on the order of the Magnificent Seven, where Kirk is something that with no special effects except real sleep was used only when necessary, where he is recruiting a group of people, and we happen to be that group of people, but we don't really know each other. But when we come in to be interviewed for whether I'm going to be the knife man or Leonard's the bow and arrow man or what, that he looks at each one of us, and we look at him like, where have I seen you before? And we just go through the whole picture, never explaining it, but scratching our heads like, God, I know that guy. Thank you again.
The thing is, we can honestly say we don't know, because we don't. It's only a little germ in Harv's mind. Oh, I'm sure he has. I'm sure the script for Star Trek 3 existed before Star Trek 2 was out.
I asked him if he was going to put pontoons on the Excelsior.
Actually, I think it looks like a flying bathtub.
That's about it.
And what about the Enterprise? What does that look like?
Well, the
Use a simile.
Knife and fork and a saucer. And
goes up and it's last one I is pregnant.
A little voluptuous around.
Special seat for you, sir.
There it is, right here. How are you doing?
How are you doing? You doing okay?
Well, I'm not fine.
You can talk. You can talk.
I'm fine. I can watch you. You got an ashtray somewhere?
Sorry, a smoker.
I'll be right here.
Yeah, keep that on that side. That's the smoking section there.
She's bringing you one.
Blow them out.
Everybody.
Well, we are here now, the 3 of us.
What else is there?
Shall we commence?
I was wondering when you had first seen the whole movie, or have you seen the whole movie?
We have. Yeah.
We had a screening for the cast and crew last
29th of May.
29th of May. And that's the first time I think that all of us saw it, saw the final cut. And, you know, that was again with an in-house family industry audience. The first time we saw it with a kind of a mixed audience, a mixture of press people and fans, was the following night in Westwood Road when we had the press screening mixed with people who had won contests. And we got a good idea of what the fan reaction was going to be like. And then that weekend, I was up in San Francisco, and I saw it at a theater in San Francisco, the Royal Theater there, with a full house of honest, genuine, ticket buy, having paid for audience. And it was heady. It was glorious. That's when I got the full impact.
Where is everybody from? Would you say your name and who you are, so we'll know? Then we know how to treat you.
Well, I'm Cheryl White, and I'm from Palmer City, Oklahoma. And I want to have a question for you, George. How many times did you have to rehearse that scene with a security guard?
Oh. Well, you know, when we shot that, that was the very last scene that we shot. And we wrapped after we did that one. Wasn't that the last day, last scene?
Yeah, they
we
thought
shot?
maybe George might not be able to.
That's right. I was really worried. You know, I didn't know how they were going to shoot that, given the fact that it was scheduled way back there. We shot that 3 times. And let me tell you, you know, I know my karate, and I've taken a few lessons rehearsing that before we shot that. When it came, incidentally, the guy that I threw is not the actor you saw calling me Tiny. He was a stunt man. And when we got ready to shoot that scene, you know, I did my stretching exercise and warm up and my push-ups and so forth and got all set. And he was all, you know, padded up and so forth. And we kind of walked through it, you know. I'll step this way and you step that way, and then I'll throw you, you know. But we didn't throw. This was all in rehearsal. And for the real thing, when we got to that point and I threw him, he's an extraordinarily good stuntman. Because I put a little beef into it, but he went flying way over there and crashed against that wall. He took it on his own. He, you know, flew off. I had the arrogance, the arrogance of the actor. I walked over to him and helped him up and said, "Are you hurt?" Did I hurt you? He popped up, brushed himself off, and said, "George, are you okay?"
I'm Donna Chris-Condary from the Tribune Star in Terre Haute. Back to George again. In the novelization of the movie, the Excelsior was supposed to be Sulu's first command. And I was wondering if there were certain scenes which were originally planned for the movie and either were cut or just did not work out for lack of time.
Not for this one. For Star Trek II, we did shoot a scene. The shuttlecraft with Dee and Michelle and myself, and Kirk announces my command. However, alas, that portion of that scene is currently playing on the cutting room floor. So that was shot, but it never was used. In this one, we didn't shoot anything beyond what you saw.
Things there were things cut.
There were
It's like there were, I think, what, 6 golden Vestal virgins, as well as the silver ones you saw. And basically, unless you saw them in a long shot, you never saw the golden Vestal virgins at all.
We didn't see the Vestal virgins hardly at all.
Yeah, I don't even know what the word Vestal means.
Who says the destination role?
Pedant.
Virtually a Latin major.
You know what the second word means?
No, he doesn't.
He has a good memory. George, I'm Gerald Schultz, Democrat. Are you working with the transportation agency in LA that you were at one time with?
I've served on the board of directors of the Southern California Rapid Transit District for the last 11 years. However, last month I turned in my resignation. The mayor, as part of his political game plan, wants to rearrange all of his appointments. I served with the pleasure of the mayor, and so it was a great pleasure serving on this board for the last 11 years. We were currently in preliminary engineering on a major subway system connecting downtown Los Angeles with North Hollywood. But it comes at a time that I suppose could be considered propitious, because I've been serving for the last 3 years on another board, the El Pueblo Park board, which is a district in downtown Los Angeles where Los Angeles was founded. There's a plaza there, and you may have heard of Olvera Street, that Mexican street that's something of a tourist attraction. Because there'll be a metro rail station, a subway station built across the street from it at Union Station. And because of the access that's going to be created by the building of that station there, the developmental pressures around Old Barrow Street, an old historic area, is going to be very, very intense. And they felt that with, my colleagues on the board felt that with my experience and knowledge with the transit district, that I could play a part in the balanced development. We want to preserve and retain the historic heritage that we have, but we also want to make it a living, vibrant heritage and a place that people will come to. So we want a balanced development there. And so I have accepted the chairmanship of the board of the El Pueblo Park Association. So that's going to become very engaging and I think challenging as well.
What did you think of the film overall? Were you pleased with it?
Yes.
With the whole...
Yes, we were very pleased with it, and we're extremely pleased about the audience reaction to the film. The film had it felt good to all of us when we were making it. You know, you get a feeling about film sometimes. It doesn't always work out, you know. I've done things that I thought were going to be good and then horrible, but this film had a feeling all the way through, and we thought that we were really getting back to where Star Trek originally was. It's kind of nice since Star Trek 1 to have a good feeling about it.
It's funny, but I don't want to answer. Was there more shot with the Klingons, and especially commander crew, than was used, or was that pretty much the way it was gone? Anybody know?
Well, you know, see, we're not there when they shoot the Klingon stuff, but I don't really think there was anything of any great note that was shot, because it certainly nothing was in the script of any great note that we didn't see.
It was unusual, and this film was very unusual in as much as usually when you're working on film, you have anything to do with a sizable part at all, you're there practically every day, even though if you don't work, they want you there, in case that you get to it. In this film, there were like 8 different things going on. They spent a lot of time on the planet with Sabat and Mary Budger on the planet. So that took weeks to do. In the meantime, Jimmy, George, and all of them, Bill, all of them, we were off. We were not in there. Then we would come back with scenes with us, and we would work a couple of weeks. And then they would go to the Klingons to the planet, and we were off again. So it was strange in as much as that we'd come in and do 2 or 3 weeks and then leave and then come back again.
But I must say it was a very tightly written script because, and Leonard is a very disciplined director. And because it was tightly written and because Leonard is so wonderfully organized and disciplined, an extraordinary thing happened. This film came in right on the button, on budget and on schedule. As a matter of fact, at one point, we were about 2.5 days ahead of schedule, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And of course, we lost that when we got to Genesis because of the complex nature of working on that set. But I guess he incorporated that into his game plan because we came in right on the button.
And we had not only the big Paramount fire, but there was a fire in up in the walks.
It almost went again. We almost had a very serious fire again on the stage we were working on.
I'm sure you're not surprised if you saw what Genesis was doing on the set itself. You know, those great,
that, you know, totally amazing to see that actually shot in the studio.
Yeah,
incredible.
They had fire going all over the place. Unbelievable.
They're real live.
They had to shut off the sprinklers, but the guy's got his hand on the valve all the time. They're ready to turn it on again. But you have to shut them off, because otherwise the heat was just, starting going.
What was the final figure on the budget for the movie?
16 million, I think. And we did 16.6 million the first weekend.
Dennis Wolbridge from Soar Cable Communications here in St. Louis. This is kind of a general question, anyone can answer it. The film seems to be getting really good reviews. The only major things I'm hearing are that were problems that maybe Leonard Nimoy is more of a television director than a film director. I'd like to know your response to that, and also, is it easier working with a director who has been where you are, who is an actor who becomes a director, rather than someone who has simply been a director all
Well, from my own standpoint of view, I don't know, there are people, you know, what is television and what are motion pictures? I'm sure they are too, but I've worked in a number of both, and some pretty good films in my past, but different directors. I can't tell you the difference except the time involved, the speed in which you actually do them. In my way of thinking, there are critics, and I will tell you this, that are film critics, quote, who hate more or less to give a film, they're reticent to give a film of Star Trek's nature a decent review merely for the fact that they think in terms of television. They think this is a television group, which is not necessarily so when you get into the background of the actors and so forth. But that's the way they clock it, in other words. I thought this film had a lot of quality going for it. And I thought that Leonard did an exceptional job. And as far as working with him, no one knows the show any better than Leonard Nimoy. He's an extremely bright man, knowledgeable. And I have never worked, and this includes directors like John Sturges and Edward Dmytryk and people like that. I've never seen a director come aboard a show so beautifully prepared as Leonard, knowing what he wanted, and if you disagree, he could show you why you were wrong, etc.
Including the editor. No, because he did more homework than the editor. But if you'll go back and watch a movie that was shot before television, right? I mean, I'm talking about some of the goodies, you know. You'll see scenes that are 5 and 6 and 7 minutes long, all on one camera. Television brought close-ups into the motion picture business, basically. There are all sorts of things like that, but I don't see anything different, really. I go along with D. I think that's a lot of malarkey, you know, this television director shooting a movie.
You know, essentially,
because all the movie directors also went to close-ups, too, when it was necessary. But you can take a scene, and I first noticed it years ago, but in a movie called Keys to the Kingdom, Gregory Peck, right? And I said, geez, look at this scene, it's all on one camera. And it's been going back and forth over here and over there, you know? You saw 5-shot scenes. Now, you see 5-shot, broken down to 3, broken down to 2, broken down to close-up. You know, that's, it's all a question of pace, whether you need it or not. And it's up to the director whether he wants it or not.
essentially what you're doing, whether it's on television or on the big screen, is you're telling a story. And how to most effectively tell the story with the givens that you have. And obviously with a smaller screen, you're going to use that to the best advantage in telling that story. And with a larger screen, you're going to use the possibilities and the opportunities that you have there. And I really kind of fail to understand that kind of critique, because what Leonard did was really tell an excited story with all of the scope and sweep that the big screen offers you, as well as the intimate relationships that we have with all of the warmth and humor. And I think particularly my two friends here, got a chance to let their characters really blossom for it. Jimmy's line, up your shop is out. And we knew about Bones' attitudes toward the Vulcan, but we saw another dimension of it now, given the circumstances and the stress that he was under. But then he reverted back to that wonderful Bones when he realized what Spock had done to him with that line, like that green-blooded kind of reading that only D can give. And it was, so Leonard told the very small, intimate story, the relationship, as well as the character revelations, and he did that on the big screen. And he gave us the great grandeur and scope, although I really regret the excision of the Vulcan sequences, when we got a chance to be exposed to the highly sophisticated and elegant Vulcan civilization. But those are the that are part of the risks that you take. But I think Leonard used the medium fully to tell this very rich and exciting story. I again, think that critic was being a little persnickety, and that kind of criticism reflects more on the critic himself rather than the subject being criticized.
Not to linger on the critic situation and so on, but I do think I want to tell you, there is a critic who can be very, very severe, and that's Richard Schickel of Time magazine. And today was the first time I had the privilege of reading his review, which was a very lovely review. Now there's a man who's not afraid to say what he wants to say. He did not class this in terms of, quote, television at all, which gave a terrific review. And he's a very severe critic, so I was pleased to see that review.
I guess you gather from this that we really like Leonard. However, I had a small criticism, I suppose it's small in some sense, of the film when I saw it, and I didn't say anything about it until the Rolls-Royce Jaguar salesman in Encino, 42-year-old Star Trek fan, the director said to me, he says, God, he says, makeup in the Klingons was like high school makeup, and nobody else has ever spotted it. To me, their foreheads were moving around. It was really bad, and I don't know why it was like that. I can only give an excuse because those makeup people are awfully good. The only thing I can think of is that Christopher Lloyd is terribly plastic. And, and he may have, shall we say, loosened the bonds a little bit, and they couldn't do anything about it, because that's the way he was. Because, with a certain makeup, and you go up like this, and you're a very plastic actor, then you will certainly loosen up the surface underneath, and the makeup suffers.
In an interview that Larry Moore did, he said that it was very good to work with the cat because everyone felt free to give and take on suggestions. I was wondering what sort of suggestions you offered to him during the filming.
Well, that happened. We've done that through the years, and that's an advantage of working with Leonard, because I think we've all given each other suggestions from time to time. If there is an outside director coming in and you begin to tell him, give him a suggestion, he's not as likely to take it, but Leonard certainly has told me many times something that he thought would work, and I have suggested something to Leonard that might work. For instance, the line, that green-blooded son of a bitch, that line was removed from the script. And I called Harv Bennett and I said, gee, Harv, I said, why did you take that line out? He said, well, we thought it was a bit severe, a little bit tough, for the movie. I said, I think you're making a terrible mistake. I said, I think it's a very funny line. And I said, I think the fans will scream. So Leonard was in great harmony with me on that. And I was very pleased to see the line was back in. In fact, when we shot the scene, I had suggested, again, a suggestion to Leonard that we do something between that line and the next line, because I thought the laugh would be so big that it would cover the next line, which indeed it does, which is a funnier line. His revenge for all those arguments.
And you didn't just want to stand there with film on
So there are many suggestions, that come. For instance, in the fight with Christopher Lloyd, Bill doesn't like to take suggestions, I can tell you that. We were sitting around the set one day, and we were talking about that fight, and I said, I think it's interesting. I said, what I think would be a very interesting thing, I said, the kind of a captain that you are, that you really don't like to kill anybody. I think when you get to that cliff scene, it would be very interesting if when he slides off, if you would extend your hand and say, give me your hand. And then, if tries to pull him off. So kind of went, you know, that. And I forgot about it. So then I was in the dailies one day and doing some looting, and I happened to see that bit. And so I told Leonard, I said, that's interesting. I told Bill to do that, and I thought that would be a very interesting touch. He said, you did?
Oh, Bill took credit, did he?
I can tell you, however, that Leonard doesn't take every suggestion. You know, if you all know Sulu, there is a good deal of the swashbuckler in Sulu. And I thought, Bob...
You swash a lot, but you never buckle.
No, my buckle is very firm. The guy who designed our costumes, Bob Fletcher. Leonard said, George, and he lifted an eyebrow. And I said, no. And he lowered his eyebrow.
I have to say, we had a lot of problems with George trying to find a place to use that. Not that scene, but about 10 other scenes.
Oh, there were 10 different
You know,
things
George
I could
was
have
going,
used that.
was going like this. What do I do? What do I do? Help me.
Yeah. And I thought, you know, on the planet, on Vulcan, I thought Sulu would have protected himself from the elements by throwing it over his head, you know, throwing it like a hood. Leonard didn't like that. But the thing about Leonard is, we were just fooling around on that, but he does listen. I mean, we say he comes prepared, and he certainly has an idea of how the scene should go. But so many directors who come prepared like that are also very rigid that way. But Leonard is open to the enrichment of his prepared vision, and he will incorporate the suggestions that are made, except for the swashbuckle part.
What changes would you make in the movie, if any?
We love it as it is. We think it's grand. I would, in the television version, like to see the Vulcan, that processional, put back in. I can see a commercial break coming, when the ship lands. And then we sell
With a golden virgin.
A lot of footage was missing in the latter part of the film where we shot at Occidental College. Was Occidental?
Occidental, right.
And it was, that struck me immediately. I thought,
Right.
where did all this stuff go?
Lovely stuff.
But,
Gorgeous.
I don't know, it seemed we must have slowed the film down somewhat. They were trying to move it forward.
But it'd be a good way to get out of the commercial and get back into the movie, I think.
What other sorts of things are we missing that we may hopefully see in a later?
I have a complete scene missing.
Yeah, I have a small scene missing too.
I think we all have.
It was a good laugh too, but I can't remember what it was.
A memorable laugh.
I know I did that. That's when we had the explosion on the set, and our special effects man was badly burned.
You mean the console?
No. When they did the
Traveling ball of fire.
Yeah,
the ball of fire. Yeah.
I have a scene missing that is very understandable why it was removed. I really, usually think, gee, I wish they'd had that scene in, but it's not possible. I don't know why they didn't think of it earlier. But McCoy's first scene in the film, joining Shatner in the elevator, he just happened to walk in and Captain is in there. And it's the first time that you see something is wrong with McCoy. It's the first indication that everything is not all right. But then he's later discovered in Spock's quarters. Now, they felt that if they had seen that elevator scene, most people would immediately know that it was McCoy instead of Spock down there, so they omitted it.
This is for George. What relationship does Sulu have with Vonda McIntyre, the person? God, she likes to focus in on Sulu.
Oh, I'm sure I could tell you. See me after. But I think she really captured Sulu in the entropy effect, don't you think?
Yeah.
Now you take that as a clue.
Okay.
Gotta read that sometime.
When does Star Trek 4 start? Will Nimoy be directing again?
We don't know. We signed options for the film. I think it's much too early for them to say, you know. But I'm sure that minds are turning already.
No.
They're busy counting the money.
It's much too early for Paramount, but not for Norman. You know, it's so hard to understand that a big business organization actually worried about this movie making any money. You know, that's unbelievable.
And it made how much so far? You said the
First weekend it did $16.6 million.
And that's what it cost to make it.
And it cost $16 million to make it.
Yeah.
Jimmy, well, is there really any doubt, though, that there'll be follow-up movies?
Absolutely not.
All the hoopla of
In our
this.
Let me tell you, about 4 or 5 years ago, around the time of the announcement of movie 1, Michael Eisner, president of Paramount, said we will be doing 8 Star Trek movies. It was in Time Magazine, Newsweek, the LA Times. We were there, we heard him say it.
You can't believe anything an executive.
With the success and with the way that the critics have responded to the way Nimoy directed, being a member and knowing more about it, would it make a lot of sense that he would be the director?
I would think so. I
love
think
to have
if Leonard wishes to direct, let's put it that way, I think he will. I think it'll be his decision.
But what makes sense isn't necessarily always what the studio does. But as far as all of us are concerned, we would dearly love to have Leonard back on board again as the director.
See, I can see that Leonard obviously would also not like to be typecast as only a director for Star Trek. The same as he's typecast as Spock. You know, I mean, I'm sure one more wouldn't hurt him. But if he was asked to do 3 and 4 and so on, he'd probably say, oh God, I gotta do something else in between. You know.
I must tell you something else that I've given a lot of consideration to. I think makes a big difference. In this film, Leonard comes in at the very tail end of the film. So he was able to give everything that he had without interruption, purely as a director, until we got into the Vulcan sequence, or in the sick bay where he was first discovered with me, and then. And I could see the difficulty of directing and acting. There's too many things happen on Star Trek, from a special effects thing that he has to get up off of the cart and look around and take care of this or that, or now to have a heavy role in another Star Trek and go through act and direct. It's a different proposition. It's more difficult. I'm not saying, you know, that Leonard, if anybody could do it, Leonard could do it. But it does make it more difficult.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, you know, this was early on in the schedule. I came in to Jamaica, and Leonard came in. You know, we've been working for about 2-3 weeks now, and I asked Leonard, how are you enjoying this new charge that you've got? And as he watched us all getting made up, seated in those seats, he said, it sure beats getting into makeup. And I think, you know, that simple process alone, because Leonard was always the first one in makeup because of the elaborate, time-consuming makeup that he had to go through. So that becomes another factor, too, if he would repeat Spock and direct at the same time, to have to invest that hunk of a day in getting into makeup, and then, you know, this bifurcated concentrating on your character, and then the overall script and the...
That's not easy, you know. I mean, it won't be easy. But as I said, if anybody could do it, Leonard could do it.
Did you all feel like you were working in a winter from the beginning?
I did in this film, yes.
Felt good.
Had somewhat of that feeling in the last, in Star Trek 2 also. The feeling was that it was going to be a good film, you know.
No, we saw that in the script, you know.
But the the way it ended, it seems to point, and it said the adventure will continue, and more or less left Star Trek fans with the impression that there is, in fact, going to be another.
Yes, that impression is given. They obviously, as you said before, as long as they're counting dollar bills, I'm sure that they will go ahead and make Star Trek in some fashion or form.
Jim, what was the nature of Paramount's reservations? He said they were worried about this film making money. What were they worried about? What could they base those worries on?
Well, it's, you get it in their attitude. I mean, you know, it's very hard to pick it out, but it's their attitude beforehand of the publicity, you know, the way it's going to go, and it's like, well, you know, should we do this? Well, I don't know. You know, you talk to even the head publicity guy who's supposed to be a genius, and I think he's great. His name is Eddie Egan. Everybody just adores him, you know. I mean, all the pros in the business who are twice as old, they say, wow, how about Eddie? You know? But nevertheless, he doesn't, he can only do so much because he gets word from the top, right? And then the executives, I won't mention any names, but the executives call up Harv Bennett, and they call up Leonard Nimoy, and do you think it's going to be okay? I mean, you know, is it, and that sort of thing. It's unbelievable.
But there's another thing about that. The executives, and rightfully so to a certain extent, they base the success of a show like Star Trek on other sequels. And they have a known, what they call a known fact figure, that very few sequels exceed the one that preceded it. But in agreeing with Jimmy in many areas, there's something of that nature. But to them, it makes sense. You know, it's very unusual, and it's very thrilling to know that this show is turning out so successful. I'm sure they're very pleased about it. There's another thing you must give credit for to Michael Eisner and Barry Diller. I thought after Star Trek 1, we would never do a Star Trek 2. And these guys came forth, they had the guts to come out and try it again for number 2, which floored me, frankly. I just thought, well, that's it. They closed the book. Of course, they knew something, you know, even from the fact that number 1 was successful. It had to be from a monetary standpoint, even though it wasn't considered a good film. You know, it's a Star Trek film. But anyhow, they're to be given a lot of credit to go forward with it, I think, the way they have.
I got to echo these feelings here because, you know, all of us in this room here are biased. You know, we love Star Trek, so that we start from that initial prejudice. But putting ourselves in the shoes of those executives, it's a heavy, heavy responsibility that they have. Millions of dollars that they got to be responsible for. You know, and that those they have to pay the interest on that kind of money. And when you look at, you know, every film, multi-million-dollar film, is made on the hope that it's going to be a great success. But how many of those really succeed? For example, there's a very fine film out right now called The Bounty, you know, and that's had a nice history that preceded it. It's not doing the kind of business that it should be doing, and it needs to do in order for it to be viable. But when they made it on you know, the hopes and the premise and a good deal of the professional judgments of the people involved that it's going to be a big success. Every film is a crapshoot. And so every executive has to approach each project as if it's a crapshoot. And there's always a downside in a crapshoot. There are actually more downsides than upsides. And that's why with Star Trek, it's been so extraordinary because we have had this phenomenon of topping the previous one. We've topped it again with this one. And so that makes the next one, Star Trek 4, that much more of a gamble because then we have to do better than $16.6 million next time around.
And yet, there's another interesting thing, too. If you look back on it, Lucas and Spielberg, when they started with Star Wars and so forth, the grosses were so tremendous that the industry has become disoriented as far as a successful film is concerned. It used to be that if a film earned above its cost $4 or $5 million, that was a very successful film. Now then, when films have grossing in terms of 250 and 60 and 300 million. Then you hear somebody say, well, gee, it only made 80 million. Right. That's exactly what they say, you know, now. So that's a little bit distorted, isn't it, when you stop and think about it?
Well, the Star Wars sequels have fans, but Star Trek started out with fans.
Yes, yes. People forget that we were there first, originally. It really was Star Trek that set off Lucas, who saw the thing there and picked up the ball and ran with it and made a motion picture.
But you know, to me, this movie, the third movie here, to me is just sort of reaffirmed the original faith that all the fans had in Star Trek. It's just like, hey, you know, don't have any, shall we say, outsiders, insiders, people who know Star Trek. You know, it's like we were talking about number 4. I called Gene Roddenberry up one day about 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago. Because I was, you know, I began to hear rumors that Harv Bennett had only had a contract for 2, right? And didn't want to do any more. Like he doesn't want to be typecast, you know. But they'll probably throw money at him. And, you know, and he just got married, so who knows. Gene said, I said, Gene, how about, you know, coming up with a story they can't refuse, you know. And he says, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, what about producing? No, I don't want to produce. He said, I wouldn't mind being executive producer in charge, you know. And the executive producer, you know, he sort of looks after the script and he looks after the this, that, and the other thing. Gene's not the easiest guy to get along with. I think he'd be damaging himself and damaging to Star Trek to be an executive producer, the go-between between the producer and Paramount, you know. But anyway, I think he's quite content now in doing what he's doing, but we need somebody else that knows about Star Trek. I think Harv Bennett does, obviously.
I've got to tell you all about something else. I just saw a young man walk in here bare-chested, and that triggered me. There's a guy here named Bill Bergholz who should get a good deal of focusing as well, because he carried the Olympic play through St. Louis 2 days ago, and he carried it as a Star Trek person. Yes. The runners get to keep that torch, and so he's got it circulating around here. You might ask around for it. He's got it in a leather case, and the Olympic Committee provides you with a uniform as well, the trunks and the tank top. And he tells me that he hasn't washed that yet, and it's not been washed, and it's floating around here someplace.
We'll smell it.
It preserves the...
Work out a good Olympic sweat.
Let me give you a little bit of the history of that. I'm a runner, and a regular dedicated runner. When I first heard that the Olympic Committee was going to be, I shouldn't say selling, but generating contributions for youth athletic activities via a contribution of $3,000 per kilometer to carry the plane across the country, I said, I would dearly love to do that. An Olympics in my own hometown, and to participate in this momentous human event, you know, as a part of this chain link of relay runners carrying the plane from Greece to my hometown would be wonderful. So I approached Paramount, or actually I approached Harv Bennett and said, you know I'm a regular runner, and there's this phenomenon happening. Could you approach Paramount and see if they would sponsor a kilometer for me? Harv said, that sounds like a great idea. Went to the front office and talked to them. Harv came back with wonderful news. Not only were they willing to sponsor me for a kilometer, but they thought it would be a great promotional thing, because the Star Trek film would be coming out just about the same time, to have me run in 5 different cities all across the nation. They bought me 5 kilometers, and I was just ecstatic about that, until we discovered that the Olympic rule